There, this is Bob from Creation Station. Welcome to Creation Station Monthly. This is our monthly show where we have two creative people get together and talk about what makes them creative, what they've done with things, what interests them, and what kind of creative projects they've worked on. Yeah, that word creative sticks with us around here a lot. As always, Creation Station at Broward.org to get in touch with me or ask about anything that we've got. Today, we've got two really cool people here to talk about space. Now, this happens to be a really key time in history for space. And so we've got Monroe Petrillo. How are you doing today, sir?
Hi there.
And Jasmine Singh. How are you today, Jasmine?
Hi, I'm doing well.
And so I'm going to let you guys introduce yourselves. Jasmine, I'm going to have you go first. Tell us about who you are, what got you started thinking about space, and why did that fire up your creative juices in that? And then Monroe, you
Yeah.
just follow up with her.
All right. So, hi, my name is Jasmine Singh. I'm currently a rising senior at Purdue University, where I study planetary science and atmospheric science. So, as far as my space journey goes, I really remember being interested from like a decade ago, in about middle school, in Earth science class when we first learned about the planets. Ever since then, I've just been fascinated. I looked at the stars, I looked at the moon. I kind of asked a lot of fundamental questions that we actually ask today. Like I remember asking like, what's out there? Who's out there? Is someone looking back at me when I'm looking up there? And ever since then, I did a ton of research, because I was so passionate. I bought so many books, I watched so many videos and movies. And then when I got to college, I originally thought I wanted to go into aerospace engineering. But I really found out that that wasn't my passion. I don't want to build the rockets. I want to study where the rockets go to. And so that's when I discovered planetary science. And I realized I was like, yeah, that's what I've always been interested in. And so that's what I applied for. And then I also study atmospheric science because planetary science is such a broad field. You can really study anything in it. So I wanted to really narrow down what my focus was in planetary science. So I decided to study the atmospheres of other planets because I've always found storms and everything fascinating. They're so scary, but it's so cool just how nature works. So I decided to study atmospheric science. And so my
So we're
main
going to get to
interests
that
were,
water vapor
yeah,
thing today,
yeah.
then, I guess, huh?
Okay. And so my main interests are planetary atmospheres, but also astrobiology. Because I've always been asking questions about aliens and, wondering if they exist, which I'm pretty sure we're not alone. And so I have always been interested in astrobiology. I just didn't know that it had a name. And so my research at NASA right now involves working on a exoplanet climate model called Rocky 3D, where I use machine learning and simulate the climates of potentially habitable exoplanets, which I find so fascinating. So, because we need to know like what factors make planets habitable. It's more than just water at the end of the day. So I'm going to pass it on to Monroe.
Hi, I'm Monroe Patillo. My interest in astronomy started when I was a teenager, and my parents got me one of those little cheap refractor telescopes. And I struggled really hard. No motors, no computers, no nothing, all manual. Got to see the rings of Saturn. I was hooked. Um, but that's not where the career money was going to be for me. So my career background is actually in computer systems, computer science, and that allowed me to have the disposable income to afford the toys of my hobby, which is predominantly astronomy. But if you ever look up the Old English word of a polymath, that's me more than a Renaissance man. So if I'm interested in something, it either gets out of my way or prevents me from learning about it, and I learn about it. So that's how I came to do all the what most people would think of as, why are you studying this and why are you interested in that, and like, because I am, and therefore I learn about it. So
And I know Monroe here was a long time with the South Florida Astronomers Association. And so, and what kind of stuff have you been doing, Monroe, for, I mean, because Jasmine like was able to take it and run with that right there. I mean, just bam, bam, bam. She
sure,
was able to fire those things off. I love that, Jasmine. It shows the
sure.
passion behind that.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, for more than 10 years, I was kind of the lead and the planner for the public outreach events for South Florida Amateur Astronomers Association. And, we would take telescopes to libraries and parks and private and public schools and, go in line and let, hundreds of children and adults look through the telescopes at whatever we could point at.
We push the
And,
kids out of the way every once in a while. Yeah.
Yeah. I would show up at Broward Main Library where Bob would see me. But we went beyond that and started doing special events. So when the event happened at Parkland, we did a special event at the nearby Equestrian Center just for the Parkland students. And we set up something which they thought was really cool because, high school students like that kind of stuff, where they could use their mobile phone to connect to the computer on the telescope mount, which was a Raspberry Pi, and they would grab the current image off the telescope by doing that. So we're going to move that to a sort of a next level, and when we resume public outreach, offer that capability. So you can look through an eyepiece, or you can grab a snapshot using your phone. And it's just, you have to move forward, because if you do what you did 20 years ago, it's just going to be same old, same old. So as we moved from film cameras to digital cameras, and from CCD cameras to CMOS cameras, you've got to keep this stuff moving. And when the pandemic occurred and sort of shut down all of our public outreach, we went online. And when we went online, we found out that actually grew our membership. And I wanted to continue with the forward movement of the technology and with staying online. And that's sort of where I split out and formed Broward Astronomy. Is sort of they went one way, I went another way. And so I've had some reasonable success at, drawing people into doing that kind of stuff.
Yeah, we have that whole, we're not going back to normal, we're going back to better.
Yeah, well,
here.
It's the new normal. It's, it's still going to be normal by the time people have done it a few times. It'll be normal, but it'll be the new normal. And it has to take a more technologically creative edge, because you literally can't physically reach out to people, but you can show them things. So you gather the information and you present it, and you present it in a manner where they can interact with you and ask questions on the fly. Because if you just do it as sort of TED Talk style without an audience, it gets boring after about the third one you do. So you have to have it interactive.
Well, for you, Jasmine, how's your internship being during that with the interactive and such?
Yeah, despite it being virtual, I mean, I was of course upset about that, but what can you do? I feel like NASA has done a really good job to keep all the interns and everyone connected. There's a lot of enrichment events where you can just go and watch a scientist talk about what they do. And they also have intern events where we can just connect with each other. And then on top of that, for Goddard, at least, which is where I'm interning at, I actually took the initiative to create a couple of group chats where we all stay connected and talk to each other. And people seem to really appreciate that. In these times, you kind of have to do what you can to stay connected. And so I feel like we've been doing a really good job. Hopefully soon I can visit a NASA center.
Well, here's a crossover. I'm currently working on a presentation that I was given the opportunity by Goddard to do one of the web public presentations. So hopefully the week after it launches on October 31st, I'll be doing a public presentation. I get a NASA associate to oversee my presentation content and to be there as the subject matter expert. They haven't told me who it is yet. So I'll be interested in doing that. And so, yeah, sure. I'd invite you.
What's it going to be on, Monroe?
It's on the James Webb Space Telescope.
Oh, yeah, I'm so excited.
The normal public presentations done by NASA have to be, fairly general for broader audiences. But the particular audience that I'm accustomed to, they want to know all the details. They've got questions that other people wouldn't ask, but they'll ask me. So I have to be prepared for all of that. Like here's one that Jasmine might relate to. The spectroscopic capabilities of the Webb are in infrared. near and medium infrared. How do you spot oxygen, which is only excited in the visible light range?
Hmm.
So, yeah, I found out by digging down into the details that they won't be able to spot it directly. They'll spot it by ozone. So they'll be able to detect ozone and infrared, but not oxygen directly. So
Hmm.
that
So,
was just, so there's a crossover.
yeah, are you going to get a chance to use those kind of tools, Jasmine, do you think?
I hope so. I'm really excited. So far, I've just been working on a code, which I mean, it's helpful to, a lot of astronomers and planetary scientists. We need to learn how to code and do that because there's a lot of capabilities with it. But I really do want to try lab work at some point. So hopefully, fingers crossed, when we go back to school, I can try some lab work.
Well, NASA does a really good job of making the observational data available to the general public. I'm sure that
Yeah.
they make it available internally, but when they do observations, they're sort of inside NASA for about a year, and then they find a way to load them up on like eyes.nasa.gov for the general public to go mining on it. And a lot of the astronomy recent finds have been from amateurs in the general public mining data that NASA might have captured 10 years ago. So having more eyes on the prize is the right way to go.
So now, what kind of we touched on it really briefly there, but I want to hear from you guys when you were young, when you were just getting into the field, and Monroe, you said you were using a refracting telescope, which I'm gonna actually ask you to explain because not everybody who watches this one's gonna understand what a refracting telescope is.
Not a problem.
But for what kind of equipment did you have, and what kind of equipment do you want? Because we just heard from Jasmine, she wants James Webb. So Jasmine, you get to tell us
Going
about the James
off.
Webb telescope in a minute. But Monroe, tell us what a refracting telescope is
Sure.
and what the differences are from what you had to where we're going to now.
Yeah, there's a couple of styles of telescope optics for optical observing. There's refractors and reflectors. A refractor is essentially you have one or more lenses at the front end of the telescope, and the light travels down the telescope tube, gets bent by a diagonal mirror, and then comes up to an eyepiece, which is nothing more than a short stack of additional lenses designed to focus the light. A reflector telescope brings in the light. It comes off of a reflecting curved mirror, goes up to a secondary mirror, bounces back, usually out through a hole in the main mirror called a Cassegrain hole, and then up a diagonal to the eyepiece. For those that are just getting into understanding telescopes, a refractor is good for looking at smaller, brighter, colorful things. But if you have something that's really dim, you need to gather more light, and large diameter refractors are hard to come by. They're deep on your wallet. So most people will, if they want a larger diameter, larger aperture, they'll go in for a Newtonian style reflector, which 8 or 10 inches and $500 and you're there. But then the mount for steering it, that's expensive if you buy one of the computer control ones. So they'll do what is known as a Dobsonian mount, and that's just like you're moving a cannon. You can move it in azimuth or elevation, and you're good to go. You can observe. But by the time you say, I want to look at something I can't see naked eye because it's too dim or for whatever reason, then you get into a computerized telescope mount, and now you're talking about a hand controller that has a catalog of things in it. You have to line it up, and then you can tell it to go to it, and it'll track it. But then the next step beyond there is now you have the computer, and you run your software on the computer and tell the software on the computer, point the telescope at this, and then it moves the telescope to it and tracks it. And some people that do that don't realize you can do that even for radio telescopes. So I've got over to the left of me here a couple of radio telescopes that I use actually indoors, and they're hooked up to a little fledgling interferometry array, which is like you take a bunch of telescopes and you make them look like one bigger telescope. But I'm doing that in radio astronomy. So I'm not just confined to optical. I'm into all aspects of astronomy. And the polymath in me says, oh, that looks interesting. Let me learn about that. So,
Well, what about you, Jasmine? What's your top end equipment that you always want that you can envision having or having access to at least?
I mean, I really want a telescope. I know, I feel like, an astronomer without a telescope, what is that, Um, but I don't know. I feel like my first one should hopefully be like a beginner telescope because, I want to get used to everything, how they work and all that. But eventually, I've seen some beautiful astrophotography, and I really hope I could get something that it is used for that. I don't know if I can get into astrophotography, because it's not easy. Like I really respect astrophotographers and what they do, because man, those pictures are beautiful. But I hope to
Now,
get,
how about
yeah.
think big here at NASA? You're going to get a chance to use the Hubble and
I
book some
hope so.
time
Those
on there and do
images are
anything?
so beautiful, and I'm so excited for James Webb because it's really gonna expand on what Hubble's doing. Because we thought Hubble was so good, but just wait. Eventually, we'll see what James Webb is capable of doing.
Now, is the Webb telescope going to be able to be doing your atmospheric stuff for you too? Or is
Yes, it
okay?
yeah,
Tell
from
me
what I
about
know,
that.
it can do it has like improved like infrared resolution and sensitivity compared to Hubble, which is why like it's going to be better. And from what I've heard, I could be wrong, but I think it's going to help with exoplanet atmospheres. That's really what I'm excited for. I think, could be wrong. But yeah, it's capable of seeing like um, what they want is it to see is like really near really like distant events in the universe. So like formation of like some of the first galaxies, which is like so cool that you can even imagine that we could look at something like that just with something that humanity made.
the galaxies that are farther away are what is known as red shifted
Mhm.
because the universe is expanding. And as they get deeper red shifted, we lose sight of them visually. So you need a telescope that's deeper into infrared to be able to pick that up.
Mhm.
And the Webb is going to be out at Lagrange point 2, which is about 1.5 million kilometers away from the Earth. So it'll have the ability to see far dimmer things, and by being a very large diameter reflector telescope, it can see very tiny things. So it has not just your typical like observing instruments, it has some specialty instruments in there. One of the things they can do is what is known as a coronagraph, which is a fancy way of saying they can blot out the brightness of a star to be able to capture the brightness of a planetary atmosphere off the
Mhm.
edge of the star. And when they do that, they can point their spectroscope at it, and therefore they can pick apart the different wavelengths of light, which will tell them molecular, you know, the molecular composition of those atmospheres. So yeah, I am not, a whiz on anything NASA, but I've done a lot of deep diving into what they would let me read about Webb, and I think it's going to be a cool instrument. But
Yeah.
that's the first step because already they're planning for Webb's successor. It's called the
Mhm.
WFIRST.
Oh yes, I've heard that.
Yeah, so it's like, okay, well, when you have information about that, let me know about that one because I'd be interested in doing a deep dive on that one. But
Mhm.
yeah, NASA is good at always having the next stone along the pathway. So, you know, we'll go with the Webb for the 5 to 10 years that we can get data from it. And then after that, park it over in the corner somewhere, bring the WFIRST out.
Mhm.
They seem to have their devices last quite a long time past their expiration point lately
Oh
too.
yeah.
Well, they've predicted that Webb is going to last 5 to 10 years. And the reason for that is the first 5 years, they have enough liquid helium to keep the instruments nice and cold so they can detect really dim things. But
Mhm.
after a while, the helium supply is exhausted for a number of reasons. But after that, it goes into what is known as a warm or hot state. And they can't quite detect as dim an object as they could when it was helium cooled, but it's out in space and it's, got a sunshade behind it. So it's still pretty cold out there. So they can still do pretty good. The problem is when they run out of the helium for pressurizing the hydrazine fuel tanks, which is what they use for keeping it oriented and in the right position in space. When they run out of that, they kind of let it drift off, to instead of being there with the Earth orbiting the sun, it kind of lags back, and eventually we can't talk to it anymore because the sun gets in the way. If you remember what happened to the Spitzer Space Telescope, this is what happened. It kind of went through a cold period, a hot period, and then we're going to run out of hydrazine. So let's park it over here and let it just go into a trailing orbit. Well, that's, 10 plus years from now, that will be the ultimate fate of James Webb is ran out of helium, back it over in a corner, bring on W first.
Jasmine, what about you and your inspirations? You started at the beginning to tell us a little bit about that. When you got into it, what did your family, who inspired you to keep on with this path that you started going off on and doing?
Yeah, so I didn't really have any formal like inspirations when I was younger, at least. It's kind of crazy to think because there's so many amazing women in astronomy that now I look back like Katherine Johnson and the hidden figures really. But back then I didn't know about any of these people, so I really just had my family to encourage me, and they were so supportive. They're still so supportive. They never never gave up. They were like, she is very passionate about this. We're just gonna let her run with it. They never tried to push me into any field, which I was so happy about. They were just like, yeah, she has a dream, so let's let her run with it. And then you can imagine like their excitement when they found out I got the internship. Like they called so many friends and family freaking out. And that's what I need, is for them to be happy when I'm happy, when I'm achieving these goals, and now I'm going to be looking towards things to do after undergrad, because I plan on taking a gap year, so I'll do something for a year, hopefully research at NASA, and then apply to grad school and stuff. So hopefully they're supportive in that too. Yeah, so my family and friends are very supportive. My friends, anytime something space comes up, they're like, oh, I thought of you. This made me think of you. And I'm just like, thank you. I really do have an influence on you guys. But yeah, now I have so many inspirations through Twitter and through, history, like all these famous figures that I can just look to and be like, wow, that's insane.
So
Yeah.
were you aware of Jocelyn Bell?
Yes.
The first observer of pulsars? Yes.
Yeah.
She is definitely someone to say, okay, I can put up with this stuff, but I was the first one to detect them and you guys didn't believe me.
Exactly.
So there's a female role model for you.
There is, yeah. And then I forgot her name, but the lady that wrote the code to go to the moon, and she was standing next to the boxes, the books with all the code. I was just like, oh my God, that's insane.
Yes. Deep math astrometrics. Yes, yes.
Yeah, it's
And
insane.
there is a building named after her now by NASA.
Yeah. So it's just insane how much, like, even though back then, women were still not having as many rights and couldn't do all the jobs that men were doing, it's still insane that women were still achieving so much, especially in the space industry when it was dominated by men.
Yep.
Yeah.
What's the one thing, Miss Jasmine, that you want, that you feel most proud of, that you've been able to create, that you've been able to do in your endeavor here with dealing with space? What do you think is the thing you feel most proud about to have built?
Yeah,
So
I would say like I guess it's kind of small, but my blog, like I get to my blog and my Twitter really, because I get to share all this stuff with people and I see how excited people get. And in no capacity did I think I was gonna amass 16,000 followers so far. But creating the blog really helps me because one, a lot of people in academia have like their own websites where they share stuff that they're doing and whatnot. But for mine, it's more kind of like an outreach type of thing, and just sharing people like topics that I'm interested in, but also like my followers actually choose the topics. Like I put out a few topics, I do a poll, and then they choose, and then I'm like, okay, I'll write about this one. I need to get back on it, but my most recent one was about the zoo hypothesis and if we are being ignored by extraterrestrial life, which I find so fascinating, just all of these different theories and people trying
Okay,
to,
Jasmine,
yeah.
explain what the zoo
Oh,
hypothesis is,
of
and
course, yeah.
then Monroe and you
Yeah.
can go back and forth on it.
Okay.
Yes.
So basically the zoo hypothesis, the name kind of tells it, is that we are being watched like animals at a zoo by extraterrestrial life, but they are kind of intentionally like ignoring us and masking their own presence. So we don't know that we're being watched, but they are watching us. And so it is very scary to think about if that's actually true. It was come up with as an attempt to answer the Fermi paradox, because the Fermi paradox is kind of like where are all the aliens?
Explain that. See, we get
Oh
so
yes,
many cool
yeah,
the
yeah,
three of us, I know we're just like, wait, I've got this. Oh wait, no,
yeah.
explain what the Fermi
So the
paradox
Fermi
is for everybody
paradox
out there.
is like it basically states like where are all the aliens? Where's all the life? The universe is so big. Where we've had to have come into contact with someone at this point, but we haven't. And so that zoo hypothesis kind of attempts to answer where these aliens are. Oh, they're there, but they're hiding from us. They're watching us, but they're hiding from us. And the reason that they're hiding from us in this hypothesis is because they don't want to like contaminate our growth as a civilization, our progress. So that's why they're not interfering with us. They're just kind of staying back and watching us. It's really fascinating to think about.
Well, the zoo hypothesis is something that we do as a species already
Yeah.
as sociologists. If you think of when we first started to discover, let's say, lost tribes in
Oh
various
yeah.
places, we would contaminate them and literally
Yeah.
corrupt and destroy them. And
Yeah.
we've learned since then it's better to observe them from a helicopter or a drone
Mm-hmm.
and do it that way. Don't get directly involved with them. So
Mm-hmm.
if we put ourselves on the other side of it and say, we're the backward tribe, they're the ones that are so advanced, I will give
Because
them
they're
credit
watching.
for, interspace travel faster than the speed of light. Most people
Mm-hmm.
won't, but I get, I give them credit for that. If they can really do that, then yes, if they're that advanced, they would most likely watch from afar rather than corrupt us. They're waiting for us to develop on our own, and they have the patience to do that, which say they may have been watching us for, tens of thousands of years. And
Mm-hmm.
but the transition we've made recently apparently is they no longer need to hide behind the duck blind. You know what a duck blind is?
I don't.
Okay, so when hunters go out trying to shoot ducks, I'm
Mm-hmm.
not a hunter, I don't shoot
Yeah.
animals, but I understand what they're doing. When they go out, they have to hide from the animals. So they'll wear camouflage or they'll put up some tree branches and they'll hide behind those. And the unknowing animals will show up and do their normal thing and they can be shot more easily. Well, hopefully they're not going to shoot us, but they can observe us from their duck blind.
Yeah.
Well, now that we've advanced to the point where we have, fairly sophisticated aerodynamic aircraft and we're launching rockets,
Mm-hmm.
they're now thinking, well, we're just going to show you have a ways to go as far as, your aeronautics and your rocketry. So we don't need our duck blind anymore. So this is kind of a tease you on moment where if you're looking for them, apparently they're there. They don't mind us seeing them, but there's not anything we can do about it because we just haven't
Oh.
advanced far enough. If you remember the movie Star Trek First Contact from years
Mm-hmm.
ago, the next one
Yeah.
of the Next Generation movies, literally until the human species launched a faster than light spacecraft, we were too boring to be worth interest.
Mm-hmm.
And same sort of thing happens here that maybe we haven't yet advanced, whether it's technological or social behaviors. We don't tend to ourselves well enough. We don't tend to the planet well enough. And if all of a sudden we sort of took a left turn and started doing better in those areas, maybe they would go, okay, it's time for you to know we're here. or as I jokingly refer to it, they're arriving next Thursday. Be prepared. And if you want to see more of that insanity thought, um, on the Broward Astronomy website, there is a video called "Stop Looking for ET." um, and if you have an hour or so to spare, you can actually watch that. That's one of our Saturday night sessions. Yeah, it's all low budget. But literally, we just put a presentation together. We explain something, and then we open the floor. And during the presentation, they can act. We can interact and have questions and answers. And the zoo hypothesis was one of the things that came up. And if they're out there, how come we've got such lousy videos of it? Well, did you see where the video says it's infrared? So that's going to be its low resolution, and it's not full color. It's gray. The second thing is, what took the picture? Well, that was a Navy jet. What Navy jet?
Yeah.
It's an FA-18. What generation? Because the first FA-18s came out in the 80s. So if it was, even improved electronics from the 90s, it's still going to be low res, low capability infrared. Your mobile phone has a better infrared capability than one of the cameras on their FA-18s. Now, if you said, I've got new pictures there from an F-22 or F-35, those I'd like to see, because those would be newer, higher resolution technology and full color. So yeah, I am a member of the Society of Amateur Radio Astronomers, and every month we do an ad hoc session called Drake's Lounge, and it's named after Drake, as in the Drake equation, that says there's just so much stuff out there. There's got to be more than us. We're nothing special.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So leading us back to what you guys were kind of also casually throwing in there, give me your pop culture reference, Jasmine. Where's space? We won't go the whole full quote of The Final Frontier. However, tell me, what's your touchstone for in pop culture for space right now?
Like just movies?
Anything.
Oh,
movies or anyone.
I would say
people.
I always tell people my favorite space movie is Apollo 13. I really like that movie.
I haven't seen it yet. Don't tell me how it ends.
I love watching that movie and just, seeing that, wow, this is something that happened in history and people were able to watch it. But, we always have, the sci-fi ones. You can go the sci-fi route with The Martian and Interstellar and Gravity, and those are fantastic movies as well. But I always go back to Apollo 13 because I think that's just got to be my favorite movie, just because that's something that actually happened. So it's like, I can imagine living in that time. I always talk about, I kind of wish I did live in the moon landing era, because it's just so fascinating, the whole country coming together to get man to the moon, and then millions of people watching on that day as we land on the moon. And Neil Armstrong, says his famous quote, "One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind." Like,
NASA's very good at, if there's a problem, put all minds to bear on it to come up with solutions to continue on or to recover. The latest one I saw was there was a sort of a suggestion as to how to recover from the Curiosity rover's wheels becoming ground up by the glass-like soil on Mars. Because a lot of what's on Mars is volcanic, and the sand is literally, think of it as ground glass, and it's destroying the treads on the rover. Well, how do they deal with it? And somebody said, ditch the treads. Like, what? How it would sink in the sand? Well, no, drive over the rocks instead of the sand. So NASA's always very good at, if there's a problem, work with what you have to find a solution to the problem and carry on. So as in the movie The Martian, keep solving one problem at a time until you're done. So that I watch a lot of science fiction movies that I'll categorize as either science interesting or entertaining. And I don't mind the entertaining ones because I can be entertained by them. But the more science-y ones these days I find on Science Channel and some YouTube videos and things like that, where, they'll get more into the detail of what's going on. And that's why I learn a lot of things for my polymath brain.
My go-to right now is The Expanse for
Oh,
exactly that reason. They seem to really have the science down right for that one, or at least as close as they can be and still make it entertaining
Yes.
in a television format. Oh, Jasmine, you haven't seen The Expanse yet?
I'm not. I remember my professor
You gotta,
he kept asking us in class and no one had seen it and he was so surprised.
Well, you can go out there and see it. It's still out there. You can
Yeah,
watch all the
it's on Prime. Yeah,
yeah, I'm
final
going
season's
to.
coming.
Yeah.
Final
Okay.
season's coming this fall. You
Okay.
got to, yeah, no, you got to. I've purposely held off reading the books only because I want to
Oh.
finish all of them on
Mhm.
Prime and then go back and pick up and read all 9 books.
Wow.
Yeah, it's gonna be a lot of fun.
Yeah,
They-
you have to watch the production companies behind all these streaming series, because they
Yeah.
may just have a contract with the likes of a Netflix or an Amazon or Hulu, and then eventually they want to resell it to some other outlet. So whatever, what is on Peacock today can get canceled and show up on Hulu tomorrow, and you get to see all the prior episodes
Yeah.
of it. So just because they've ceased production on it, if you've missed out on it, find it through one of the other streaming channels and
Mhm.
binge
Yeah,
watch.
it's all there on Amazon. You can go watch
Yeah.
it all. So my next question for you guys that I want you to kind of think about for a second here. Space, we, at least the 3 of us here, and I think a vast majority of people think space is a pretty cool thing. Space is really interesting. There's a handful of detractors out there and stuff. But for the most part, what do you think that the biggest misconception about space, about having, as a creative field, as a scientific field, space, gets both that, things going on in our minds. What's the biggest misconception that a lot of people have out there from what you guys do or what you could be doing? Like we just had the example on Thursday. We did an interview with someone from NASA, from the Artemis program, one of the ground engineers, and he really expanded on, well, no, it's not just this one little thing. We do all of this whole chunk of stuff from assembling to launching to recover for doing all these things. That really impressed people, I think. So what do you guys think is the big misconception that about what you do or what you think in space or being creative is?
They think that science is narrow,
Yeah.
and that, you only do, like, you're an astronomer. No, what is your niche within that? There's astrobiology, there's planetary formation sciences. There's all these very deep niches within science that allow you to think of things beyond our Earth. And people, I guess the way you describe it is they have blinders on, in that they think that this is what something is, and in reality it's much broader than that. And as we create new things to observe stuff, we are learning more about that, which can create whole new branches of science, like gravitational wave observing, or gravitational wave theory. And there's a whole avenue of new kinds of instruments coming out that will detect gravitational waves, and that's just one very narrow sliver. Science and then astrophysics and physics are just so broad that people don't connect with all that's out there.
What do you think, Jasmine?
I think I could say so many things. I think one of the things that kind of bothers me is that people, when we talk about looking for life, they always think of intelligent life and they never think of microbial life. And so that's why we haven't brought it up yet, but I was going to bring it up. I'm really fascinated by icy moons as well. So I wouldn't mind studying those in the future. So I'm super excited for Europa Clipper, Dragonfly, all those missions. Because of the possibilities, what we could discover there. We haven't really went there before, besides like Cassini did flyby, So I think people don't understand that even bacteria, if we find bacteria somewhere else, that's also life. It doesn't just have to be intelligent beings, because if they think that way, then okay, yeah, then we won't be finding it for, like, who knows, the rest of humanity's existence, who knows, but if they think in the way, like, that, okay, bacteria is also considered life, then we have a very good chance of finding that like very soon, you know. So that's a big thing that bothers me. But also another one that bothers me is that people think that I won't go into it. I know it's a very debated topic, but space exploration is a waste of money. We shouldn't be doing it. You know, that type of thing bothers me as well. Big misconception, you know, people don't bother looking into what we're doing it for. They just think, okay, you're just spending money, wasting, you know, money on a bunch of rockets and then half of them explode, you know, but that's not why we're doing that.
We have a little bit better record than half right now, I think, but
Exactly. Yeah,
yeah,
I know,
but I get
exactly.
the no, but I get the point, and
Yeah,
I hear that a lot too,
yeah.
and I think that Monroe, you definitely have heard because
People
you were
forget,
there for
yeah,
Apollo. You were there for the wind down.
people forget the early days of NASA
Yeah.
when, you know, every week or so they'd blow up something on the
Yeah.
launch pad, or it would leave the launch pad and get up a couple of 100 feet and then lose control of it and they'd have to blow it up. So that approach is something that NASA has done in the past. They never expect it to blow up. They never
Exactly.
want to destroy it. It's just what happens, but you learn from it. You progress from it. The next one will be better. The next one will be better. Well, SpaceX just has the money to have the next one occur sooner than the appropriation by Congress of next year's NASA budget. So they are progressing things much faster than NASA did in the early days because they have such an independent source of funding. So I don't begrudge SpaceX any of what they're doing, including
Oh, no.
Starlink, which is a completely separate discussion. Starlink and astronomy, pro and con. But yeah, I think we've got to start realizing that space exploration has now moved from the something only so dangerous and expensive that governments do it to commercial. But
Yeah.
commercial is going to do it what first? Human exploration and tourism are always, you know, why did you take your covered wagon out to California? Well, we're going to go settle out there. Okay, well, why are you going to Mars? Well, we hope to settle there. Or, you know, why are you tramping through the woods all the way out to California? Lewis and Clark expedition, because we want to see what's there and how big it all is and what's interesting. So exploration. These are not unheard of things in human existence. It's just now it takes a lot more money and more advanced technology, but it's the same thing people have always done.
That's true. It all started with, you know, wanting to see what the rest of the earth looks like, and we had people explore that. There were some bad things that came out of that, but
Yes.
there was also a lot of good.
Yeah, what's on the other side of the hill?
Exactly.
Um,
Exactly.
I've watched a number of the presentations by the SETI folks, and
Oh,
they first started out in radio observations, and then they went to light, you know, laser observations. And Jill Tarter was giving a presentation the other day, and I was lucky enough to be able to chat. And I said, does it make sense for SETI to add gravitational wave observing? Because if you can detect basically an energy source and you can eventually modulate it, you can carry data on it. People don't realize that we're looking in this very narrow thing called the electromagnetic spectrum. You know, all these radio frequencies and light frequencies and gamma and X-ray, and all these things are just one kind of physics. And even LIGO, gravitational wave observing, we're looking at interference patterns, which are just changes in light. So we're still just looking at light. We're not actually looking in new ways. And, you know, by SETI starting to look in gravitational wave, we may find that, you know, much like we detected pulsars as a repeating sequence, and now we're looking at fast radio bursts and gamma radio bursts, we may eventually find out, well, when you finally get out of your infancy, that's how you communicate reliably over extremely long distances, is you modulate gamma bursts or you modulate gravitational waves. So we may find the signal from ET buried in what we would think of as the noise.
So now one more thing for you guys before we wrap up here, is we've just been flying along that time. what is the one thing that you miss that you wanted extra help with at some point back when you were getting started or something like that? Or maybe it's just something that you're disappointed in now. I mentioned this, I think to both of you at one point, as we were setting this up. The thing that always get flabbergasted is we never went back. Was it yesterday? I think it's yesterday, the 26th is the anniversary of landing a car on the moon and driving it around 50 years ago, and we never went back. I don't get that. I mean, I know.
Well,
I know there's reasons.
Yeah.
yeah, that's not out of
What's your
lack-
guys' disappointment? What's your thing that
That's
you're like?
not, we didn't go back out of lack of scientific curiosity. We didn't go back because it still was dangerous and still cost a lot of money, and therefore had to have federal funding in the NASA budget to do it. And if the political will wasn't there to do it, there was not sufficient funding to do that thing. And they looked at the cost of, how much all these disposable rockets was costing. And they said, well, let's cut it back from the moon back to Earth orbit. And we came up with the shuttle, which was a good first try at a space truck, a reusable space truck. Ignore the fact that the launch vehicle was a throwaway, but the space truck itself was reusable. And you can see now we've made the next step in commercial space exploration. And we're looking at, well, obviously the boosters are now reusable.
Okay, Monroe, you've done try to do a good job of reinforcing the positive side. Tell me, what are you disappointed in?
What I'm disappointed in?
What or something that failed for you? Maybe it was as a
Connecting the dots. I
Yeah.
refer to it as connecting the dots. There are a lot of observations in physics that have made, and some of them are historic. Some of them are even Nobel Prize winning, but they don't connect the dots. They don't go, okay, I see that this can be used here. How can it be used in other ways? If you look back into the development of ion propulsion, it took 40 years for people to connect the dots and say, okay, we're not going to launch a rocket from the Earth using that because it's too anemic. But once we get out into space, what can we do with that? And you had early missions that just said, well, throw a couple of ion engines on there and let's see how well it works. And then after that, they got faith in it and decided this works really well. They haven't gone the next step. We're still basically spitting things out the back to go forward. And there's science, there's Nobel Prize winners in things called optical tweezers. That's where they actually use light from very small lasers to push things around. And they push around molecules and viruses and bacteria because you're looking at it through an X-ray microscope, and you can't get in there with tweezers. So how do you shove something that small? You shove it with light. Oh, so light can push things. Okay, if light can push things, why can't we use light as a mechanism for propulsion? I know, solar sails. No. That presumes that we have these gigawatt lasers that are blazing, lasers through the Earth's atmosphere, frying up molecules and hitting a sail. And once it gets out of range or blocked by something, you lost your propulsion. And if you think of the sailboat analogy, if you're in the water, you have a keel and you can tack your sailboat. Have you ever seen what happens when a sailboat loses its keel? And it can't turn because there's no water to push against. Well, there's no water in space. So if you have a solar sail, it's great for accelerating you out to somewhere. How do you slow down to get into orbit? You'll tack. You'll tack using what? There's nothing there.
Figuring out what, yeah. What about you, Jasmine?
Connecting the dots is something I think we're still not doing our best job at.
Mm-hmm. In terms of something I'm disappointed.
Or just something that you thought would have changed, would have been different by now. You grew up after. You grew up after we already did this.
Yeah, exactly.
And I'm disappointed that we didn't go back. I mean, I can't imagine what younger people are just like.
Yeah. I guess it's more of a broader thing, but I guess I'm still disappointed that there's like still a divide in the community. Um, a lot of people with very strong opinions, um, especially with the recent launches for Branson and Bezos. There's a huge divide in the community about commercial spaceflight and what that can do. And and I see more of the positive side of it because I think it's going to really change space exploration and like, we can send ordinary people up there. That's the goal, hopefully, is just to send anybody up there to see what Earth looks like from above. And obviously we still have a long way to go, but those flights really showed that it's possible. But obviously people still have opinions about that. I totally get it. Don't want to go deep into that because it's a very touchy subject, but yeah,
Go
like
for
I
it.
still,
Tell
it's
us.
the whole billionaires going to space thing that people talk about. That's people have their opinions about, oh, why are they going? They have this money, they're just taking joy rides in space, that type of thing. And then you have the other side that's like, why aren't they focusing on Earth? Which I've said many times, you can care about space exploration and Earth at the same time. They're not two separate things. NASA works a ton on Earth. They have climate change initiatives, they have precipitation measurements, they have a ton of satellites up there looking at wildfires and any natural disasters and just everyday, weather. So that argument is just, I don't like that argument because we can focus on both at the same time. But I totally get what they're saying, but yeah, I just wish the divide wasn't as strong because I think this community, when we come together on a lot of things, as Monroe was saying, when we put our minds together, we can really achieve so many great things. I mean, we have so many countries working together. We have the ISS, like amazing things like that. I just wish, that wasn't a thing, but it's always going to be, I guess there's always going to be two sides of the coin.
Yeah, I think it's a matter of what people, for whatever reason, are willing to ignore as in your
Mhm.
face fact.
Yeah.
Um, think about a person and air travel. At one time, air travel was only for the wealthy because
Mhm.
only wealthy people could afford to create an airline for other wealthy people. And
Yes.
they always used to dress up like Sunday suit and dress to get on board of an
Mhm.
airplane. And now it's just like now you can't wear those flip flops.
Yeah.
But at one point, probably in the next 5 to 10 years, people are going to board aircraft that have no pilot or co-pilot on board, and it's going to take off and land successfully. And how much training will they have had before they got on board that airplane? They
Mhm.
aren't. They're just passengers. So the passengers on board Blue Origin flights, I put in the same category. How much
Mhm.
training did they need? It was an autonomous craft. They
Mhm.
were not going to suddenly jump behind the helm and steer the spacecraft. They
Yeah.
were passengers, just like on board an aircraft today. If something goes wrong up in the cockpit, they've got a pilot and a co-pilot and some mildly trained flight staff to just talk on the radio. So it's the same sort of thing.
Yeah.
I don't discredit them for anything that they're doing. And
Oh
as
yeah.
to what do you call an astronaut and what's the definition of an astronaut?
Mhm. Yeah.
Um, yeah, I do have a problem with NASA redefining the term after the fact just to exclude people.
Yeah.
Uh, that stunk a bit, but come up with a new term. I
Mhm.
have a friend who flew on NASA's 747 Sophia with the infrared
Wow.
telescope in the back.
Yeah.
Yeah, she did 2 flights on Sophia,
Yeah.
and she wears a NASA jacket in educational demonstrations, and it
Mhm.
has a leather badge on it with wings. She is not
Oh.
allowed to call herself an astronaut. She calls herself an aeronaut
Oh yeah.
because she hasn't been up to that
Yeah.
level,
That
and she did
level.
it in an airplane, not in a rocket. But,
Okay.
did she have to go through training? Yes.
Yeah.
Did she have to take emergency training should anything go wrong aboard the aircraft? Yes,
Yeah.
several hours worth. About as much training as they got to get on board Blue Origin. But she's still an aeronaut. So, if you want to classify the Virgin Galactic and the Blue Origin tourists as aeronauts, I think they'd be fine with that until you come up with a
Yeah.
better term.
Yeah.
They definitely achieved something that Most of us haven't yet.
Exactly.
So
Yeah. Yeah. It's still under 100 people, I think, or something around those range.
yeah.
Guys, this hour just flew on by. Thank you guys very both much for being here for this. It was really fun. I think you guys both brought us back up from being disappointed. That was a nice, good ending. Hopeful that we're all going to get there someday. I don't know that they're going to let me actually be an astronaut, but I'm quite all right being a passenger and just taking a
Oh,
vacation
yeah.
on the moon for a few days. I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
It's been fun. Thanks, Bob.
Yeah.
Thank you, Monroe. Thank you, Jasmine, for being here. Your sites will
Yeah.
be up on, will be linked here
Yeah.
for us. We'll see everybody. Let me throw up our ending slide here as we're getting ready to close. So thank you again, everybody, for being here today. Creation Station Monthly and Creation Station at Broward.org. We'll see you next month for our new creative topic. And always, we'll see you on Thursdays for Creation Station Week for Tech Talk Weekly. Thank you very much, guys. Have a great day.
Bye.